Theodore Boone Kid Lawyer by John Grisham, a First Chapter Friday read aloud video with the Word Nerd. Today as you listen, watch for the story quote that will appear on screen. Write it down, word by word, and then follow the instructions given to you by your teacher. Hi, my name's Amanda Zieba. Welcome to my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd, and another First Chapter Friday video. This week I'm going to be reading to you from Theodore Boone Kid Lawyer. But first I'm going to ask you a question. It's a question that adults like to ask kids all the time. And that question is, what do you want to be when you grow up? When I was really little, itty bitty, my first answer was probably a cowgirl. My second answer was probably an Olympic gymnast, and then finally a writer. But what do you answer when people ask you that question? For our main character, Theo, he has always answered lawyer. I'm going to read you the blurb. That's where we find the summary of the book on a hardcover book. It's on the inside front cover. And then the first chapter. Here we go. In the small city of Strattenburg, there are many lawyers, and though he's only 13 years old, Theo Boone thinks he's one of them. Theo knows every judge, policeman, court clerk, and a lot about the law. He dreams of being a great trial lawyer, of a life in the courtroom. But Theo finds himself in court much sooner than expected, because he knows so much, maybe too much. He is suddenly dragged into the middle of a sensational murder trial. A cold-blooded killer is about to go free, and only Theo knows the truth. The stakes are high, but Theo won't stop until justice is served. Brimming with the intrigue and suspense that made John Grisham a #1 international bestseller and the undisputed master of the legal thriller, Theodore Boone Kid Lawyer will keep readers guessing and pages turning. So let's do just that and turn to Chapter 1. Here we go. Theodore Boone Kid Lawyer by John Grisham. Theodore Boone was an only child and for that reason usually had breakfast alone. His father, a busy lawyer, was in the habit of leaving early and meeting friends for coffee and gossip at the same downtown diner every morning at 7. Theo's mother, herself a busy lawyer, had been trying to lose 10 pounds for at least the past 10 years, and because of this she'd convinced herself that breakfast should be nothing more than coffee with the newspaper. So he ate by himself at the kitchen table, cold cereal and orange juice with an eye on the clock. The Boone home had clocks everywhere, clear evidence of organized people. Actually, he wasn't completely alone. Beside his chair, his dog ate too. Judge was a thoroughly mixed mutt, whose age and breeding would always be a mystery. Theo had rescued him from near death with the last-second appearance in animal court 2 years earlier, and Judge would always be grateful. He preferred Cheerios, same as Theo, and they ate together in silence every morning. At 8 a.m., Theo rinsed their bowls in the sink, placed the milk and juice back in the fridge, walked to the den, and kissed his mother on the cheek. "Off to school," he said. "Do you have lunch money?" she asked. The same question. 5 mornings a week. "Always." "And your homework is complete?" "It's perfect, Mom." "And I'll see you when?" "I'll stop by the office after school." Theo stopped by the office every day after school without fail, but Mrs. Boone always asked. "Be careful," she said, "and remember to smile." The braces on his teeth had now been in place for over 2 years, and Theo wanted desperately to get rid of them. In the meantime, though, his mother continually reminded him to smile and make the world a happier place. "I'm smiling, Mom." "Love you, Teddy." "Love you back." Theo, still smiling in spite of being called Teddy, flung his backpack across his shoulders, scratched Judge on the head, and said goodbye, then left through the kitchen door. He hopped on his bike and was soon speeding down Mallard Lane, a narrow, leafy street in the oldest section of town. He waved at Mr. Nunnery, who was already on his porch, and settled in for another long day of watching what little traffic found its way into their neighborhood. And he whisked by Mrs. Goodloe at the curb without speaking because she'd lost her hearing and most of her mind as well. He did smile at her, though, but she did not return the smile. The teeth, her teeth, were somewhere still in the house. It was early spring, and the air was crisp and cool. Theo pedaled quickly, the wind stinging his face. Homeroom was at 8:40, and he had important matters before school. He cut through a side street, darted down an alley, dodged some traffic, and ran a stop sign. This was Theo's turf, the route he traveled every day. After 4 blocks, the houses gave way to offices and shops and stores. The county courthouse was the largest building in downtown Strattenburg. The post office was second, the library third. It sat majestically on the north side of Main Street, halfway between a bridge over the river and a park filled with gazebos and bird baths and monuments to those killed in wars. Theo loved the courthouse, with its air of authority and people hustling importantly about, and somber notices and schedules tacked to the bulletin boards. Most of all, Theo loved the courtrooms themselves. There were small ones where more private matters were handled without juries. Then there was the main courtroom on the second floor where lawyers battled like gladiators and judges ruled like kings. At the age of 13, Theo was still undecided about his future. One day he dreamed of being a famous trial lawyer, one who handled the biggest cases and never lost before juries. The next day he dreamed of being a great judge, noted for his wisdom and fairness. He went back and forth, changing his mind almost daily. The main lobby was already busy on this Monday morning, as if the lawyers and their clients wanted an early start to the week. There was a crowd waiting by the elevators, so Theo raced up 2 flights of stairs and down the east wing where family court was held. His mother was a noted divorce lawyer, one who always represented the wife, and Theo knew this area of the building well. Since divorce trials were decided by judges, juries were not used, and since most judges preferred not to have large groups of spectators observing such sensitive matters, the courtroom was small. By its door, several lawyers huddled importantly, obviously not agreeing on much. Theo searched the hallway and then turned a corner and saw his friend. She was sitting on one of the old benches alone, small and frail and nervous. When she saw him, she smiled and put a hand over her mouth. Theo hustled over and sat next to her very closely, knees touching. With any other girl, he would have placed himself at least 2 feet away and prevented any chance of contact. But April Fenimore was not just any girl. They had started pre-kindergarten together at the age of 4 at a nearby church school, and they had been close friends since they could remember. It wasn't a romance. They were too young for that. Theo did not know of a single 13-year-old boy in his class who admitted to having a girlfriend. Just the opposite. They wanted nothing to do with him, and the girls felt the same way. Theo had been warned that things would change, and dramatically, but it seemed unlikely. April was just a friend, and in a great deal of need at that moment. Her parents were divorcing, and Theo was extremely grateful his mother was not involved in the case. The divorce was no surprise to anyone who knew the Fenimores. April's father was an eccentric antiques dealer and the drummer for an old rock band that still played in nightclubs and toured for weeks at a time. Her mother raised goats and made goat cheese, which she peddled around town in a converted funeral hearse painted bright yellow. An ancient spider monkey with gray whiskers rode shotgun and munched on the cheese, which had never sold very well. Mr. Boone had once described the family as non-traditional, which Theo took to mean downright weird. Both her parents had been arrested on drug charges, though neither one had served time. "Are you okay?" Theo asked. "No," she said. "I hate being here." She had an older brother named August and an older sister named March, and both fled the family. August left the day after he graduated from high school. March dropped out at the age of 16 and left town, leaving April as the only child for her parents to torment. Theo knew all of this because April told him everything. She had to. She needed someone outside her family to confide in, and Theo was her listener. "I don't want to live with either one of them," she said. It was a terrible thing to say about one's parents, but Theo understood completely. He despised her parents for the way they treated her. He despised them for the chaos of their lives, for their neglect of April, for their cruelty to her. Theo had a long list of grudges against Mr. and Mrs. Fenimore. He would run away before being forced to live there. He did not know of a single kid in town who'd ever set foot inside the Fenimore home. The divorce trial was in its 3rd day, and April would soon be called to the witness stand to testify. The judge would ask her the fateful question, "April, which parent do you want to live with?" And she did not know the answer. She had discussed it for hours with Theo, and she still did not know what to say. The great question in Theo's mind was, why did either parent want custody of April? Each had neglected her in so many ways. He had heard many stories, but he had never repeated a single one. "What are you going to say?" he asked. "I'm telling the judge that I want to live with my Aunt Peg in Denver." "I thought she said no." "She did." "Then you can't say that." "What can I say, Theo? My mother would say that you should choose your mother. I know she's not your first choice, but you don't have a first choice." "But the judge can do whatever he wants, right?" "Right. If you were 14, you could make a binding decision. At 13, the judge will only consider your wishes. According to my mother, this judge almost never awards custody to the father. Play it safe. Go with your mother." April wore jeans, hiking boots, and a navy sweater. She rarely dressed like a girl, but her gender was never in doubt. She wiped a tear from her cheek, but managed to keep her composure. "Thanks, Theo," she said. "I wish I could stay. And I wish I could go to school." They both managed a forced laugh. "I'll be thinking about you. Be strong." "Thanks, Theo." His favorite judge was the Honorable Henry Gantry, and he entered the great man's outer office at 20 minutes after 8 a.m. "Well, good morning, Theo," Mrs. Hardy said. She was stirring something into her coffee and preparing to begin her work. "Morning, Mrs. Hardy," Theo said with a smile. "And to what do we owe this honor?" she asked. She was not quite as old as Theo's mother, he guessed, and she was very pretty. She was Theo's favorite of all the secretaries in the courthouse. His favorite clerk was Jenny over in family court. "I need to see Judge Gantry," he replied. "Is he in?" "Well, yes, but he's very busy." "Please, it'll just take a minute." She sipped her coffee and then, "Does this have anything to do with that big trial tomorrow?" "Yes, ma'am, it does. I'd like for my government class to watch the first day of the trial, but I gotta make sure there will be enough seats." "Oh, I don't know about that, Theo," Mrs. Hardy said, frowning and shaking her head. "We're expecting an overflow crowd. Seating will be tight." "Can I talk to the judge?" "How many are in your class?" 16. I thought maybe we could sit in the balcony?" She was still frowning as she picked up the phone and pushed a button, waited for a second, then said, "Yes, Judge. Theodore Boone is here and would like to see you. I told him you are very busy." She listened some more and then put down the phone. "Hurry," she said, pointing to the judge's door. Seconds later, Theo stood before the biggest desk in town, a desk covered with all sorts of papers and files and thick binders, a desk that symbolized the enormous power held by Judge Henry Gantry, who at that moment was not smiling. In fact, Theo was certain that Judge had not cracked a smile since he interrupted his work. Theo, though, was pressing hard with a prolonged flash of metal from ear to ear. "State your case," Judge Gantry said. Theo had heard him issue this command on many occasions. He'd seen lawyers, good lawyers, rise and stutter and search for words while Judge Gantry scowled down from the bench. He was not scowling now, nor was he wearing his black robe, but he was still intimidating. As Theo cleared his throat, he saw an unmistakable twinkle in his friend's eye. "Yes, sir. Well, my government teacher is Mr. Mount, and Mr. Mount thinks we might get approval from the principal for an all-day field trip to watch the opening of the trial tomorrow." Theo paused, took a deep breath, told himself again to speak clearly, slowly, forcefully, like all the great trial lawyers. "But we need guaranteed seats. I was thinking we could sit in the balcony." "Oh, you were?" "Yes, sir." "How many?" 16, plus Mr. Mount." The judge picked up a file, opened it, and began reading as if he suddenly forgot about Theo standing at attention across the desk. Theo waited for an awkward 15 seconds. Then the judge abruptly said, 16 seats, front balcony, left side. I'll tell the bailiff to seat you at 10 minutes before 9 tomorrow. I expect perfect behavior." "No problem, sir. I'll have Mrs. Hardy email a note to your principal." "Thanks, Judge." "You can go now, Theo. Sorry to be so busy." "No problem, sir." Theo was scurrying toward the door when the judge said, "Say, Theo, do you think Mr. Duffy is guilty?" Theo stopped, turned around, and without hesitating responded, "He's presumed innocent." "Got that. But what's your opinion as to his guilt?" "I think you did it." The judge nodded slightly, but gave no indication of whether he agreed. "What about you?" Theo asked. Finally, a smile. "I'm a fair and impartial referee, Theo. I have no preconceived notions of guilt or innocence." "That's what I thought you'd say." "See you tomorrow." Theo cracked the door and hustled out. Mrs. Hardy was on her feet, hands on hips, staring down two flustered lawyers who were demanding to see the judge. All three clammed up when Theo walked out of Judge Gantry's office. He smiled at Mrs. Hardy as he walked hurriedly by. "Thanks," he said, as he opened the door and disappeared. If you want to find out more about Theo and the upcoming trial and what happens with April and her parents and somehow how they all get involved in this murder trial and a cold-blooded killer, you're going to have to pick up a copy at your school library, purchase one from your favorite local indie bookstore, or grab it via the link in the description box. I hope to see you again here for another First Chapter Friday video. Happy reading! To continue reading Theodore Boone Kid Lawyer by John Grisham, pick up a copy from your school library, purchase one from your favorite local indie bookstore, or grab it via the link in the description box. Then be sure to check out the rest of the First Chapter Friday playlist. I have tons of great middle grade and YA stories there waiting for you to hear. Today's mystery quote says, "Repeat something enough, and folks will start to believe it." Thanks so much for joining me on my channel, Learning with the Word Nerd. I hope you'll come back again for more First Chapter Friday videos, brain breaks, and other great content. You can find me online at these places, which I've linked below. See you again next time, and happy reading!